Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Come to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. My name is John Mark Tully, and joining me, as always, is my host.
Garrett K. Jones. How's it going, everybody?
Going pretty good. And it is it just me, or does it seem like it's been a while since we've done this?
Well, it's been a couple of weeks since we've recorded.
Yeah.
Because the episode from 2 weeks ago, we pre-recorded like a week in advance.
Yeah.
And then that next week we didn't record anything. And then last week was the Monday before 4th of July, and so we were very busy blowing things up. We were celebrating.
We were celebrating a bunch of rebels
taking down an empire.
Taking on an empire.
Yeah. Ironic that fits within the theme of today's episode.
See how I segued in there?
That was nice. That was really nice. And actually,
I'm a professional.
So what did you guys end up doing for 4th of July?
We went, actually, our church, a lady in our church, she has a property that's kind of out in the country where we live. And so we went out there and we just had a cookout with hot dogs and stuff like that. And then we were able to sit out in her backyard. She's got a huge backyard that overlooks a soybean field, and you're able to see not only the big fireworks from the town we live in, but then all the other even smaller towns. And then, as my wife said, the rednecks shooting off fireworks. You're able to see like the whole field, just kind of all these different fireworks all over, which was kind of cool. They're way off in the distance, but you can still see like about 3 or 4 different towns fireworks at the same time.
That's really
kind of cool. Yeah,
that's really cool. I was over at my parents' house. They live in a cul-de-sac, and so like every year, everybody in that end of the cul-de-sac gets together and they light off fireworks all at the same time. And the last couple of years, we've been using one of my dad's ladders as like a tier for like the different fireworks. So I'll set fountains out and get them going. And this year was actually kind of cool because some of the fountains, like I would start at the ones down below to kind of build up. And there's a couple of fountains that actually lit other fountains on the way up. So I'm like, ooh, chain reaction, fun.
Yeah. We were actually kind of worried that we wouldn't be able to have the fireworks this year because where we're at in Illinois, we've been under a drought for most of the summer. But fortunately, we got a bunch of rain. Well, fortunately and unfortunately, we had some pretty bad storms here a couple of weeks ago that did quite a bit of damage. But the rain, was sorely needed for the crops here. And it helped with, everyone was able to shoot off their fireworks, and both legal and illegal fireworks.
Yeah. What's funny is so my parents live like about a mile or so from the high school bowl. And so there's always a fireworks display there, and it draws huge crowds. But because of how close they live, there's really no need for them to go because they can always catch the view from the sky. But about another mile or so the other direction, we had people who were lighting off really illegal fireworks. They're practically mortars going off. And they're the kind of fireworks that usually you only see at like professional displays. And it ended up drawing out both police and firefighters in that direction around 10 o'clock after we had gotten done. Like all of a sudden we see a slew of emergency vehicles just, burning up the road, heading out that direction. And from what I understand, there was someone who actually got arrested because he got drunk and belligerent when a cop asked him to stop lighting off the illegal fireworks. He tried to take a swing at the cop and ended up getting himself booked. So, yay!
Yay! Well, as he said, we're going to be talking about rebels and Imperials. It's Star Wars, as always. Today, we're going to be discussing why the Empire lost. Because that's the way George Lucas wrote it. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to no. No, of course. We're nerds. We got to go more into deep depth about this, don't we?
Of course
Yeah,
we
I
do.
mean, we can't just, yeah. So I think for me, I think you have to start at, when asking the question why the empire lost, I think you have to start at the beginning and look at how the empire was formed. There was no real conquest of this empire. It just came into being.
Well, no, not really. I mean, there was conquest, but if you look at it, it's actually probably one of the smartest ways to build an empire, because rather than going through building up an army, in secret, or what, and being a pronounced villain, Palpatine goes through the process of building up military forces on multiple fronts,
Mm-hmm.
and working these angles, and getting other people to really build the armies for him, but being the person who's at the central control of it all. And he basically gets them to fight each other, whittles out most of the opposition, so there's virtually nothing to stop him. And then he pulls the rug out from underneath everybody,
Yeah.
flips that script, and hey, he's now the emperor. Because I mean, if you look at him in episode 1, he's just a civil servant.
Mm-hmm.
Being named the chancellor at the end of episode 1, he's humble about it. He's unaccepting, or he's appreciative, but it's something that's, it was a shock for him, quote unquote. And so but that's exactly how he manipulated things to be.
Yeah. I'd say, if you're looking at like the closest real life analogy for him coming to power, I would say how Octavian gained power in the Roman Empire, where it went from the Republic to the Empire, and you have this kind of power struggle where he slowly starts gaining all of this more and more executive power, until he becomes, he's proclaimed Augustus, and you can kind of see Palpatine do the same thing. He's slowly, through these special powers acts and all these things, he starts gaining more and more executive power and more personal power into him, until, basically him declaring himself emperor was just a formality.
Yeah.
Because at the end, he was, essentially emperor in all but name only. He had so much power. It was just a matter of like, well, I might as well just make this, obviously that was the point all along. But I think what was interesting is what happens after the empire is formed, when you start seeing the empire go from the imperial policy seemed to go from a more offensive-minded military to definitely a more defensive-minded, where it's all about maintaining and policing what you had, instead of going out and fighting. And I think that was one of the first downfalls, is they, up for the longest time, they kept a more defensive posture when it came to any type of thing, and just, or not, I wouldn't say defensive, but more police force aspect.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing, is like, anytime you have a civilization where the individual rights, which were already fairly prominent, start becoming repressed and start being pushed aside, and they are eliminated, that's when you start seeing, the society, kind of implode upon itself. Because while it might be easier to impose more and more rules and more laws and more force on a repressed people group, it's ultimately going to be their undoing, because you're going to start having people fight back. And that's what happens. You start having these little pockets of rebellion. And at first, the people were acting like, man, we're never going to win. There's no way, because the empire is too big. They have too much military power. And yeah, but when you start looking at the way the rebels were going about doing it, they were knocking it like the best way I can describe the downfall of the empire. You brought up a historical example. I'm bringing up a fictional one, and I'm kind of jumping genres and franchises here. But look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, specifically the episode "The Drill" from season 2. There's the Fire Nation's using this massive drill to bore through the walls of a city called Ba Sing Se, which for more than 100 years has stood without anybody breaching its walls during wartime. And the Fire Nation has spent the last century at least trying to break down these walls and unsuccessfully. The drill is this huge mechanized thing. We're talking like at least 2 football fields long and as wide as maybe a quarter of a football field. Massive drill. And the way it's taken down is not from outside, but from inside. The Avatar and his team, they go in and they bust, they cut through parts of the support struts inside. And then they find a place where they can cause the most damage. But then from the inside, they also back up the sludge removal system, because it's what's happening is as the drill is going through, it's using water, a water filtration system to pull out all those chunks of debris, turn it into mud, and flush it out the backside. Well, what happens when that slurry gets backed up, can't go anywhere, and then you have all these other support struts broken down, then it's the outside force that becomes the undoing. And that's how the rebels operated for such a long time. They broke down the internal structure of the empire, and they found ways to back up supply lines.
Yeah. Do you think that also that things like bad leadership played a pivotal role? The fact that you had so many really you had a lot of bad leadership and a lot of bad, because you had a system where everyone was either afraid of their own job, or that system of fear of that could have played a role in, instead of uniting and working together, the captains and the admirals were fighting with themselves, fighting internally.
Well, and I think that does provide a problem, and the reason for that is because you have Palpatine, to avoid any kind of uprising from within his ranks. He made a point of pitting officers against each other, or pitting commanders against each other. And he did that deliberately. The problem was that ultimately became the undoing, because you didn't got people who became defectors, like you see with Callus in during Rebels.
Yeah, in Crix Madine. Yeah.
But the problem is when you have all these highly ambitious people working within a large beast like the Empire, and you're not treating them well, or you as the highest echelon of leadership are literally pitting them against one another, you create this hostile work environment that's just going to implode upon itself. I mean, look at any business that did that. Look at any corporation that has done that. You see that happening within corporations now, where they put their lower ranking people against each other.
Yeah. And you also seem to have, especially early on in the Empire, a situation where you have the Emperor Palpatine comes in, creates the Empire, and then he just kind of seems to vanish. Like he seems to leave, and that's never a good situation when the guy who's supposed to be the ultimate, authority, just kind of like, all right, you guys take it.
Yeah.
I'm over here doing my thing. So they seem to be, you had leadership, but you didn't have ultimate leadership. And I think you also had a situation for a long time where I think even up till the end, they never really took the rebels seriously. They never saw them as a real legitimate threat. You can see that in the way they talk about them and the way they're, they, consider them like vermin, like just, we can just swat them away.
Yeah. It was really problematic because you had Palpatine doing that, and it's kind of funny. Like, you look at, I mean, Tolkien makes a good point. He says this through Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. While good may not always prevail, evil will always be its own undoing. And that ultimately is what we see in the Empire, is that Palpatine grew too powerful. While he consolidated a lot, he ultimately became his own undoing because he underestimated the rebellion. He underestimated the ambitions of his own officers and his own people. He underestimated the value of family loyalty that Anakin ultimately had. The thing that really turned him to the dark side was wanting to protect the people he cared about.
Yeah.
And when he finally has an opportunity to protect someone that he cares about from immediate death, which he couldn't stop it for his mother, he couldn't stop it for his wife because he ultimately became her undoing, he has a chance to fix that with Luke. And the funny thing is it's not a combat. It's not lightsaber duels that put Palpatine in the ground. It is a dismembered, disabled war veteran with massive breathing issues that picks him up and tosses him over a ledge.
Yeah.
So, there's so many different things that created the downfall of the Empire, but I think ultimately it came down to the fact that it was Palpatine thought it was too big to fail.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything that the Empire, kind of switching gears here for a few minutes, is there anything, do you think, that Empire could have done to avoid defeat?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. First of all, the problem is that the Empire went in with this iron fist mentality.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't done that, if they had been a lot more flexible, if it hadn't been the socialist regime hierarchy that we, from a certain Western European country model that we've seen in the past being used, it probably would have been much easier for them. Because at that point they would have won the hearts and the minds of the people. And while you had a lot of people who were very pro-Empire because they had been drinking the Kool-Aid and just paying attention to whatever news and narrative Palpatine had been spinning in the media, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you ultimately, I mean, if, there's that old adage, you win people more over with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah. But then you have, you could have the argument, well, then it wouldn't be the Empire.
Oh, you can still have still have an empire, but the problem is, instead of picking and choosing where they wanted to enforce the Iron Fist, it was guns blazing all the time, always. And if you look at the first, decade of the Empire's existence, what were they doing? They're continuing on warfare and trying to conquer other planet systems.
Yeah.
They didn't need to. Think about how many systems were already a part of the Republic prior to it being converted to an empire. You didn't need anything more. It was already too big to expand into.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you? What are your thoughts on that? Was there anything they could have done differently?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I think, maybe as far as combating them, it's always, I mean, in history has shown that is very, very difficult to combat a rebellion like that, where you're dealing with insurgencies and guerrilla tactics that it is. I mean, you look at throughout history,
Mm-hmm.
the French Resistance, the Viet Cong, the American rebels in the American Revolution. It is very, very. I think their best bet would have been early on, to try and do what the Roman. I mean, again, I'm using Rome as an example because I think, besides the certain Western European power that came about in the early 20th century, Rome is another good parallel for the empire.
Yeah.
When they would fight these tribal peoples, they would have trouble when they would fight their guerrilla tactics, but their biggest downfall would always be when they would try to fight them straight up. When they would try to fight the Romans on their own terms. I think that's what the empire needed to do early on, was to force a major battle with the rebels early on, before they were able to consolidate their power and get, because head to head, I don't know if the rebels would have been able to stand up to them before, if they would have done that before Endor. I mean, even at Endor, you saw the only reason they lost, that the Empire lost, was because they were able to destroy the Death Star and kill the Emperor.
Well, that's not the only reason. That's not the only reason, because there's a meme that I've seen floating across social media that if you look at what's going on in the Death Star towards the end, okay, especially at the end of Return of the Jedi, when Luke is taking Vader to the shuttle after Palpatine's been killed, nobody knows that Palpatine has been killed. Nobody has any clue about that.
Yeah.
But you're hearing gunfire on the Death Star. Why is that?
They're fighting against themselves.
Bingo. Why are they fighting against themselves? There's no rebels other than Luke on board the Death Star. And they're not shooting at him.
Yeah.
They're shooting at each other because at that point, the rebel fleet, Lando and his group, his squadron, have already infiltrated the infrastructure of the Death Star, and they're going for the generator. They know that it is just minutes away before that one thing that is keeping them safe and alive on the Death Star gets blown up. And that's going to kill everybody. So what's happening is you have people who are part of this empire who realize that they're on the wrong side of history. They're trying to evacuate, and there's only so many spaces on the escape pods.
Yeah.
And they're killing each other for that. But then you take a look at what's happening on the ground battle on Endor. The biggest issue that the Empire has is the same issue that the United States has during Vietnam. They underestimate the local population.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest threats that we had in Vietnam was the fact that we underestimated our military forces, which had superior firepower, superior technology. We underestimated a bunch of people with sticks.
Yeah.
Who knew the terrain, who knew the landscape, who knew how to use it to their benefit.
There was a movie, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's a line in it where two people are, one's a soldier and the other one's just I don't know if they're both soldiers or what, but they're watching a newscast of Vietnam, and the one guy makes the comment of, how are we getting beat by a group of people that's throwing sticks and stones at helicopters? And the other guy makes the comment, how do you defeat a people that's willing to throw sticks and stones at helicopters?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and
Yeah,
I think that was Kong Skull Island, maybe.
it might be. It had something to do with the. I remember it had something to do with the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah,
Anyway,
I mean, that was the whole point. Like, I mean, looking at Aliens, um, the Jim Cameron movie, that was the whole premise. Like, it was a Vietnam movie in space.
yeah,
And so when you take a look at that, I mean, the Ewoks, I mean, despite the fact that they're cuddly and they're cute and you just want to punt them all over the place, they were efficient warriors. They knew their landscape, they knew their terrain, they knew how to use it to their advantage because they had been living there for however long in a mostly technologically unadvanced civilization. And basically they're Paleolithic.
yeah. And let's
And
be honest, they were man eaters. I mean,
they were there.
Yeah.
The poor stormtroopers didn't see that coming.
Oh no.
Yeah,
And they're just playing the drums with their helmets.
Yeah,
like,
when
oh.
I was 2, I thought, oh, that's cute. They're just playing the helmets as drum. No,
Oh.
there's a much more terrifying reason behind that.
And the fact that the rebels are just like, oh well.
Right? They're all just partying and drinking. More than likely, what they're drinking was probably like something like to make them knock out, and that way the Ewoks could eat them too. How bad would that be if the biggest threat in the galaxy is a bunch of Ewoks?
Oh wow.
This is how dark we get, guys. This is how dark we get.
Oh man.
That would probably make for a much better Star Wars movie than anything Kathleen Kennedy is cooking up right now.
Wow. Well, I think we continue this next week and we look at the other side. We look at the rebels. We're coming up to our half hour mark, which is about usually our mark where we wrap things up. So yeah, I think next week we look at the rebel side and see what the rebels did to help them eventually defeat the Galactic Empire. So, well, Garrett, why don't you tell the fine people out there where they can find you at?
Yeah, you guys can find me on a couple of different platforms. I am on Instagram and Twitter. My handle there is at @GKJ_publishing, where I post about my books. I post about my YouTube show. My channel on YouTube is GKJ Publishing, and which YouTube's starting to use the @ symbol now too. So just @GKJ Publishing, all one word. I have a show on there called The Right Way, where we do top 10 book recommendation lists. We do author interviews. Creator's Corner is the creative writing tips that I do once a month, right? And in fact, not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, the 22nd, I have the last Creator's Corner tip for the season, as we're coming to a close on that. And then the end of July, the 29th, I have my season 5 closer. So that's big. I'm doing an award. I'm giving out awards for best guest host for the top 10 videos, best guest interview for the regular monthly interviews, and then best guest for my April interview marathon that I did a couple months ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. As for us right here, of course, you can get a hold of us as always through our email. That is warofthestars1@gmail.com. That is one of the best ways to get a hold of us. Or you can do so on Twitter at the same handle @warofthestars1. All of those social media, just search for War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, and you'll be able to find us there. We are on most of your podcast platforms, including Stitcher. Of course, we are on Spotify. And just search for War of the Stars. You can find us there. Patreon.com. Check us out there for if you want to support the show, or check out the link in our description for our t-shirt store. You can buy cool merch there. That will about do it. As always, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. this is our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
This is the way.